Welcome to our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. Here we're going to take a deep dive into the minds of some really daring, impactful change makers. I'm your host, Gill Hunter, and I'm the managing partner at Square One Law. In each episode, we're going to meet some innovators, some trailblazers, and we're going to talk about their successes, their fears, their challenges, and their lived experiences. We're going to understand their secrets to their resilience and their source of their passion, so that we can understand what drives them to achieve. These are all leaders who inspire us to step out of our own comfort zones and fear less, do more. Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. Today I have with me Kate Baucherel. She is a businesswoman, an emerging tech expert, a speaker and an author. So a multi-talented woman. And I'm delighted that she's here to talk to me today.
Hello,
Hi, Kate.
Lovely to be here.
Great to have you. There's so much to talk about. There are so many different
How
things.
long have we got?
Yes. You're a woman with many hats. So let's start with your business, Gallia Technologies.
Okay, so I actually started off as an accountant of all things, but I was the accountant who could do tech in the business. So when I left university, I didn't ever want to be an accountant. I went off to America and I worked for an IBM business partner that's now part of Oracle. And when I came back, there was an advert saying, knowledge of AS400, an advantage in little letters on the bottom for a financial management trainee. So I polled up at Northumbrian Water and said, I have a degree in accounting. Yes, I'd like this job. And I know how to work the AS400. So on the first day, they took me down to IT and said, could you show us how to work all of these back-end things? And so all right from the very start of my accounting career, I was running the Unix box or the small business server, or managing the data capture and the structure of the reporting that was going on for management. And eventually I just pivoted completely into doing technical stuff, but I still have that strategic accounting underneath, which means that as a consultant, as Gallia Digital, I'm able to bring both the business strategy and my knowledge of technology to the fore. And it really started off as working with what was brand new at the time, which was social media and websites that were moving up from sort of Web 1 to Web 2 kind of, and getting businesses online and understanding how it fitted with their strategy, how it fitted with their human behaviour. And gradually, as more and more technologies started to appear and accelerate, I picked up on those and became more involved in the development of software and the application of new technologies. And when blockchain really hit the scene in sort of, I guess, 2015, when Ethereum was in its sandbox, I looked at it and my accounting brain said, that's a doddle, that's a ledger. I understand this. And onto my understanding of blockchain and crypto assets that have evolved over the last sort of 8 years and more, they don't stand alone. They sit with artificial intelligence and with the technologies that are converging to give us Web3. So it's been quite a journey. And I'm able to bring all of that to the consulting work that I do, which is effectively working with software developers to actually sit with the client and work out what they really need. They don't necessarily need a buzzword. They need to know how it's going to improve their business, how it's going to access new markets or streamline processes or speed things up. If it's not going to do that, don't use it. And I will also sit down with C-suite, with professions, with people who need to understand what's coming, because it's coming so fast. So that's what I do with Gallia Digital.
And I think that's a really important role, isn't it? Because quite often tech is seen as a thing in itself. And it's devolved from board level down to, IT will sort that out. But now tech has become such an integral part of our lives across a huge range of things, that it's got to marry up with your business strategy.
Yeah.
It's got to work with it. And you think that's obvious, but I think because of the way tech has developed, it has been very much seen as a sort of a bit of a dark art that only techie people can understand. They can just get on and do that, and it'll help the business no matter what. So I can see, I can really see where you've got that niche with that technical expertise, the business expertise, but also the ability to talk to both people.
Yes,
there's a techie language that you can translate.
I can translate geek to English, yes, and French actually. But yeah, I think we have a lot more options because when I started my career in late 80s, we didn't have email. We had bulletin boards. They were exciting. We had some internal communication stuff. Oh, they came a little bit later.
They were like
I remember being on chat rooms in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
But there really weren't that many technical options. You digitized. Instead of a typewriter, you had a word processor. So it was the same thing. It was just done on a different machine. And now we're getting to the stage that it's not just digitization, it's genuine. This is something completely new that you couldn't do before. If you ever wanted to jump from A to B and you couldn't because the technology didn't allow you, maybe you can now. So we're in a very different world, and it's bewildering.
It is, and that's, blockchain I know is one of your real expertise. I have never heard anybody explain blockchain in a way that I've properly understood it. So there's a challenge. Tell us in as short, few and many words as possible. What is blockchain and why is it so important?
Okay, so it started off as, I guess the first application of blockchain is Bitcoin. And the idea of Bitcoin came from, it didn't just spring out of the air. It started off, late 70s, early 80s with the work of cryptographers who were looking at different ways of holding information and trusting information rather than trusting the person who was compiling it. So for that, you could, say, my bank keeps the accounts of where my money is. And over the course of probably 25 years, there was an increasing movement to say, what would happen if we didn't have a government, we didn't have banks? How would we actually trust? How would we contract with each other, and how would we have some sort of trusted peer-to-peer payment system? I mean, we get things like PayPal coming out of that, so paying by email, but you still need the bank at either end to put the money in. And over time, and with the development of encryption techniques and the ideas that grew one upon each other, we get the idea of Bitcoin. And so this is something that can be sent from one person to another, but you're not trusting someone to keep a note of that. You're trusting a system to keep a note of it. So if I send you a £5, then there is a little transaction that goes, that's fine, you had a £5, you have sent a £5, and we will put that into the list of transactions. And if I try to pretend to send you the £5 again, it will go, no, you've already done that. So it'll kick it out without adding it to the list. And then it will close the list off. It will use cryptography to bring that to a tiny little hash that has all the information of all the transactions and a reference to the previous page, if you like, in the ledger, the previous block.
Okay.
And then you open a new page, a new block. And if you want to go back and change something and go, I didn't really send her that £5, we can both go to the pub now. You can't, because you've got to check with all of the network and go, are we agreed that this page is accurate? That's an automated process. It's a consensus that, we're going to add that page to the ledger. So if you change it, you then have to change the next page because it's got a reference to the previous page. And you've got to change the next page and the next page and the next page. So you get this security that's based on, actually, the system's agreed that that block is part of our chain and everything in that block can't be changed. So this gives us a chain of blocks of transactions that are stuck together, can't be fiddled with, can be seen by everybody, and therefore can be trusted. And if you take that for something simple like, I'm sending you a £5, we can see when that was done. We've got an audit trail, and we know we haven't fiddled it. What other things can you do? Could you put in there, we smelted this cobalt ore and we had this much carbon emission. That's set in stone now. You can't nip back and go, oh, actually, it was less.
Yeah.
Or this fruit was picked on this day. This fruit was still intact when it arrived at the wholesalers, but somebody dropped it. Well, it wasn't the producer.
Okay.
So we get all sorts of applications where you want to be sure what happened on a particular day and be able to verify the accuracy of the transaction, and that's why it's important. So we've gone from, I'm going to give you a fiver, to actually we can record all sorts of information in this particular structure that is decentralized and confirmed by the system and visible and trusted.
So are we using blockchain technologies every day? We just don't know it, or
unlikely. You will see applications of blockchain in supply chains. So certainly, if you see Volvo cars driving around with EV batteries in, though the ore that has been mined for those batteries has been traced using a blockchain system, so that you can allocate the emissions. If you buy certain fruit in certain places, then that fruit has been traced from producer to store using a blockchain system. So it depends very much. I think there are things that we're consuming that have blockchain as part of the technology stack.
I mean, it's got to be. I'm a tech lawyer, and I've been practicing for nearly 30 years now. And one of the trends over the last few years has been the value of data. But more than ever, when you've got fake news and all of that sort of stuff, it's about the integrity of that data. So it's got to be a technology, not just of now, but of the future. Are there developments in blockchain that will make it even more accessible and easy to integrate into process?
Oh, very much. I mean, the Bitcoin blockchain ticks along and manages Bitcoin. There is a community of core developers that work on that. Bitcoin's a special case because it has issues with being the first, the dirtiest, the slowest. But there are many blockchains. There are thousands of different blockchains. And some have very specific purposes. So there are some that are built by banks for banks.
Yeah.
So we look at R3 Corda, we look at the likes of Ripple, Stellar, Solana that are working with payments. So they have different functions, and they are increasingly being refined and improved to make it easier to use and to manage that integrity of information. And actually, that's one of the ways that possibly links up to artificial intelligence, is that you want your AI trained on data that has integrity. Can you use blockchain to verify the data upon which your AI is being trained to improve the decision making? So these are the kind of things that we're thinking about, the idea that you may have data coming from the Internet of Things. You have a verification layer where that data arrives, and that is a transaction in the block. So you can go back and go, yes, that was collected by this machine, by this sensor in this field in Zambia, and you know that you have accurate information. And then, as your artificial intelligences are trained upon data sets, you know the data set has integrity, so the decision-making support has integrity.
And you mentioned crypto a couple of times there, and it's had a bit of a bad press. It's had a bit of a bumpy ride over the last few years. What's that all about? Has it got a future? Has it not?
Yeah, very much. I mean, it's been a particularly interesting few years. When Bitcoin first arrived, the people or person who behind the Satoshi Nakamoto pseudonym that proposed the idea said, hey, get some in case it takes off. So the developer community got the odd one and mined them, and it really didn't start taking off until probably 4 years later. And we've had a real mix of genuine innovation and absolute greed and criminality. Where there is money, there are criminals. People think about sort of malware and ransomware, and they kind of blame it on crypto. But actually, the very first malware that was circulated was on a 5.25-inch floppy disk in 1989. and you had to send the ransom in dollars to an address in Panama. So that's been around for a lot longer. Bitcoin just made it easier, but more risky for criminals because you can actually trace the stuff because it's a transparent ledger. So we have all sorts of different things. We have greed, we have scams, we have people thinking it's a get-rich-quick scheme. We have regulators scrambling to keep up and not necessarily understanding what's going on. So it's been a particularly torrid time. I think the real nadir in the end was the collapse of the FTX exchange in the Bahamas. And that was communal garden fraud. It didn't matter that the assets were crypto, apart from the fact that people put their money in that company because they thought it was a way to get rich.
Yeah.
So we've got to get away from that. Then there's some amazing innovation. Cryptocurrency itself as a concept is sufficiently strong that we start to see the emergence of central bank attempts to use that technology for their own digital currencies and to ease the movement of money between countries. And there's a lot of proofs of concept going on around that now. So yes, I think crypto has a lot of legs, but it is not a get-rich-quick scheme.
So with crypto, people talk about mining crypto. What are they actually doing when they're mining?
Oh, okay. So
and why does it take so long? Why does it require so much processing?
Okay, that's specifically with Bitcoin.
Right.
So mining is it's baked into the original proposal, unfortunately, where it says, gold miners used physical energy to mine gold, and so we will use CPU energy. So the actual energy use is baked in. And it's this idea of when I've got a list of transactions, I just want to confirm with the network that it's going to be added to the block. And it uses the same kind of system as you would in an IT network to just make sure all of your computers are working fine. It pings out information. It comes back and goes, we have a consensus, general agreement that the system's okay.
Yeah.
And so what this is doing is it is asking for effectively a vote from the system to say, yep, that's fine, let's add that block on. The way it's done with Bitcoin is that people are running those computers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, using a lot of energy. It's a ridiculous amount of energy. It is not sustainable. To be the one to be recorded as the agreement that it's to be added, because they win some Bitcoin. At the moment, they win 6.25 Bitcoin. That's going down. It's going down to 3.12 in April next year, April-May time.
Is that what they call a halving?
It's a halving, yes. So it's halving the reward every 4 years, every 210,000 blocks. But Bitcoin is basically the only major cryptocurrency that uses that system. Ethereum, which is the second biggest, did because there was no other technical option at the time. But they built into their system a requirement to change. And a year ago, they managed to flip the whole Ethereum blockchain onto a new way of confirming each block and adding it to the chain. So we talk about mining in the context only of Bitcoin, and we talk about staking or voting or in the context of all of the others. And it's that process of everyone okay that we add this on? Yes. Everyone okay that we add this one on? Yes. And that gives you your security because, as I said, if you want to go back and change something 5 pages before, you've got to check with everybody again, and you won't be able to keep up.
Yeah.
Does that explain it? I mean,
yeah, it does. Yeah, no, it does. It's
Excellent.
fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm completely enlightened now as to what's going on.
But in terms of that sustainability, in terms of the energy use, yes, Bitcoin uses a huge amount of energy because of the way it's structured. There is research into renewables and the use of geothermal and stranded energy and so on, but it's a very difficult thing to solve. And it's old and slow, and it's Stephenson's rocket. But when Ethereum switched, it went to sort of a fraction, an absolute fraction per transaction. The energy use is basically who's got their computer on at the time and holding the database.
So obviously, you know, the crypto and blockchain are here.
Yeah.
The chat at the moment is all about AI and how this is going to revolutionise everything. What are the emerging tech, the emerging technologies at the moment that are really going to be game changers? Where do you see that developing?
So the explosion of interest in artificial intelligence really comes from it suddenly being user friendly, and the arrival of ChatGPT. But it's been going on for even longer than the work underpinning Bitcoin. And we used to talk about neural NLP and sort of the language models. And yes, suddenly everyone thinks it's human because it talks like a human. And it does that because of the data it's been trained on. So I think artificial intelligence is going to speed things up. And I think at Thinking Digital, one of the speakers said that the key to a really interesting transformation technology is, does it make things faster? Does it make things faster? So blockchain, you get, is it faster to access information and to trust information and verify it and so on? Yes. With artificial intelligence, it's because it's pulling from the data, it gives you what you're looking for very quickly. It will speed up certain things. But I think part of the danger with particularly large language models, I mean, let's focus on those to start with, because that's what everyone gets excited about at the moment, is that at the moment it's trained on Wikipedia, which has its own issues with bias, and Amazon reviews of all things to get that thing. But it's basically that predictive text on your phone. All it's doing is saying, what's the most likely next word? So there are horror stories of, there was a legal firm in the US that was sanctioned quite solidly by a judge because they turned up with a beautifully written set of arguments, lovely references to cases, none of which existed because they'd got ChatGPT to write it. And so it had gone, what's the most likely next word? Book versus trainers, okay, 2012. And it just made it all up.
Yeah.
Because it's drawing from all of those words and all of those, the language structures that we use. So effectively, it's kind of eating its own tail because it's only trained on what we generate. If we start to generate more stuff using it, it will use the stuff it has generated to train itself, and it's just going to go around in a circle. So we need to have a much greater understanding of exactly how artificial intelligence of all types, so we're lumping in machine learning and neural networks and so on, how that data feeds in, because back to data is the new oil, data is the thing, and what the dangers are with that data. So do we really understand if our decision-making model is based on too little data, too much data, very old data that is biased against protected characteristics? There are so many minefields with it. But I think that the balloon of artificial intelligence has gone up now, and we need to find ways for it to be a reliable tool to advance equality and productivity. So that's the biggest challenge. I don't think it's the tech, it's the humans and how it's used and what the understanding is.
Yeah, I mean, I view it as if you look at just things like ChatGPT and Bard, they are productivity and efficiency tools in a business. They shouldn't become the output of generating the output of the business. Yes. I'm in a legal firm, and when everybody read that case, they were like, "Oh my God, how did they not? Why did they not check them out? You don't put anything in court unless you've checked it. Yeah. But if you are presuming, if you're coming from a point of view of, well, this must be right because ChatGPT said it.
It used to be Google says.
Yes.
And actually there's sources, if you go very quickly, you'll get to academic papers and this, that, and the next thing. But now there are some things you go for a Google search and the first 3 pages are all artificial intelligence. Yeah. Regurgitating each other.
And like you say, that becomes that sort of vicious circle, doesn't it? Of the more data you put in, that's based on the data that's already there.
It just goes round.
It just goes round and round and round. And also, where the sources are things like Wikipedia, which are self-generated anyway.
Yes.
And I think does it not draw on a really old set of books that are out of copyright?
Probably anything that it can get hold of that is not.
So yeah, from a legal point of view, you don't want something that's out of copyright because that's 70 years after the death of the author. You know, it's like
there are certainly concerns around perpetuating old biases.
Yeah,
very, very much.
Yeah.
And we really don't want that.
No.
Not good.
So you'd speak about these things on a regular basis, and you're in big demand across the world, not to go and talk about these things. What's the most sort of exciting speaking gig you've had?
Oh gosh, I got flown out to Calgary for 48 hours in end of May, start of June, which was absolutely brilliant. And the keynotes were out of this world. I accepted the gig when I saw the keynotes because the first day was Matthew Ball, who writes about the metaverse. The second day was Timnit Gebru, the godmother of AI,
brilliant,
who is absolutely so hot on the ethical side. Do you really need to build it? What are the unintended harms? And you're sitting there, wow, yes. And Michio Kaku, the quantum physicist. So I was making extraordinary numbers of notes in all of those talks. Just because the level of inspiration, but it was quite something to be a little lower down on the bill than them. I was excited.
I'm sure they were excited to have you on board as well. I'm sure it works both ways. And one thing I've recently discovered, to my great pleasure, is that you were also an author.
Yeah.
And I have just finished your first book, Bitcoin Hurricane, available in all good bookstores. And it's great. I mean, this was written in 2017. And the stuff that you talk about in here now, I can go that we're almost there. We're almost there. It's quite sort of predictive as to where things are going to go. You've got a series of these books now. First of all, why did you decide to write some fiction?
I was absolutely bullied into it. I'd already written quite a bit of non-fiction. And somebody approached me and said, I'd like to write a cybersecurity book. He said, I know all about cybersecurity. You can write, you know the tech. Can we do something together? And I went, oh yeah, brilliant. Yes, love to. And so we sat down and had coffee and then had lunch and then had coffee and then had coffee and cake. And each time I'm saying, right, what's the structure? What's the audience? And I mean, I've done book pitches before for non-fiction and I know exactly what I'm looking for. And eventually he said, why don't you do it as fiction? And I said, don't be silly, I can't write fiction. And that was summer 2016 and he literally nagged me for 8 months. Wouldn't do anything around non-fiction. I said, go on, try it. And so I Googled, how do I write a novel?
Now, if ChatGPT had been around, you could have just said,
no,
write me in.
Oh, really, no.
We'll not go there.
They're dreadful things. And I came across a website that actually gave me the best feedback, which was I put a little snippet onto their blog and got some feedback, and they said, "Oh, this is really good," and gave me sort of few sort of ideas that I then took forward. The big thing was, who's your main character? And it went through, what hair color, eye color, siblings, what do they like to drink? What do they cook for a friend? What do they have any pets? Where do they live? How old are they? And so I built this character going, oh yeah, okay. And then suddenly Cameron sprang fully formed into the middle of my consciousness. And I went, okay, let's see what this character does. And that's really how it went. So that character is a cybersecurity expert who is dealing with ransomware. And so every page I sent to my cybersecurity friend and said, right, am I on the right track? And they'd say, keep writing. And maybe say, oh, you could pop a pineapple underneath that cafe table just to spoof the Wi-Fi. Oh, good idea. And so for 5 books now, I've been sending that to my friend, and they have come back and said, oh, there's a neat little tool for finding out where in the world somebody was when they sent this tweet. Here's a YouTube video about it. Have you thought about that particular type of attack? Or that's a good idea, but you wouldn't use 2G. It will have gone by the mid-2040s. Why not create a virus and send it out through the Bluetooth network to create a mesh that people can communicate on? Okay, brilliant. So the stuff that I don't necessarily know or that will stretch the ideas, I'm going back to the experts. And there's a few things in one of the books. I've got a fabulous sort of physical penetration of an office building where Cameron ends up, sort of helping with the photocopying and actually taking away a computer and pretending to be part of IT support. And that's based on an exercise that a cybersecurity person in this region once did. As part of, it was an exercise, and right at the end, I think he dropped his phone or something, and it gave someone time to go, wait, who are you again? And then, there was a code word, and the management were like, well done. Now we've got lots of notes on what to fix. And he gave me permission to use that in the book. So it's really genuine stuff, and it's so much fun.
So how do you describe what's the genre? For somebody who's listening who hasn't heard of them, what?
It's a thriller, but it's a high-tech thriller. So the characters and the plots running through it, they are thrillers. But behind that there is absolutely solid tech, and it's real stuff, and I have to be very careful not to make too much stuff up, although I am trying to push the boundaries now and go, well, what could happen in 25 years time? But I'm using a lot of the tech that's available now and thinking, what could it do? Where's it going to go wrong? How's it going to break? How are we going to behave with it? So they're techno thrillers effectively.
And I mean, as I said, one of the things that I really like is that it's not just about glimpses of what tech might look like, it's glimpses of what life might look like. And, reading the first book now, when it was written 6 years ago, it is real life now, but it wasn't when you wrote it.
No.
So what are you writing about now that's going to happen in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years' time?
Oh, well, the most recent book, I ended up with a hybrid Olympic Games. So using metaverse constructs, artificial intelligence, skin suits, all sorts of stuff. So you've got studios around the world with people doing gymnastics, and it's all broadcast, and all the judges are in different places. But then you might get a triathlon where everyone's actually got to be in the same place because they've all got to run across the same terrain. So you only have to ship a certain number of athletes to your very far in the northern hemisphere place because it's going to be too hot otherwise. So that was a lot of fun, sort of working out, how would you use augmented reality in an opening ceremony, for instance? How would you engage a global hybrid audience? So I had a bit of fun with that. And for the next one, I've just had to bite the bullet and go quantum. So I've got my data center already sort of teased in the 5th book, where there is actually a quantum data center that is deep in the tundra, staying cool because you've got to keep those babies at 0 degrees Kelvin or something bonkers. Yes, we're gonna see what you can do to a quantum computer. And I had a bit of fun following the Quantum Village at DEF CON, just to see the kind of potential attacks that people are already considering. What could happen? How could you compromise the output of a quantum computer? And then, of course, my big question thereafter, because they're all character-led, these books, I have to have a villain that wants something. How are they going to get their money out? It's not just tech for the sake of it. So I need to nail why my supervillain wants to manipulate this quantum computer. What's in it for them? And when I've got that, I'll start writing it.
Well, I look forward to it. I've read book 1, but I need to get the rest because they're a good yarn, and it would translate very well onto the screen as well.
They would, and it would be rather nice if that was to happen. I have had inquiries, which is flattering, I think, understanding that actually even just the first book was interesting enough for a producer to contact me. So one day, you never know.
Yeah, be great. And so, Kate, in amongst all of these things that you do, flying around the world, writing books, running a business, helping companies get to grips with emerging tech, do you have any time for yourself? And if so, what do you do?
I chase teenagers around the district.
I understand that pain.
Yeah, so my pair are 15 and 17, so we're looking at universities, we've got driving lessons going on, we've got GCSEs and A-levels coming up, we've got every activity under the sun. So that tends to occupy a large amount of my time, herding 2 teenagers, 2 cats and a husband. And when I really need to get away from it all, I do karate.
Which obviously features in the books as well.
Well, if I'm going to write a fight scene, that's the only way I know how to fight, because I've been doing karate for 26 years now.
Right.
So, I can write a fight scene as long as it involves karate techniques. Can't do any other.
So is Cameron sort of slightly biographical then?
There's bits, but that character's younger than me and has, the village is familiar to me. The village that Cameron lives in is familiar. Yes, if there's a fight scene, it's got to be karate.
And this podcast is called Fear Less, Do More. I mean, there's no doubt that you are fearless in terms of you are pushing the boundaries of lots of different things, particularly as a woman, I have to say, in tech. Tech historically has been very male dominated, so it's brilliant. It's brilliant to see that. What in the future do you want to do more of?
I really love sitting down with individual companies and working out where they can benefit most, even if that is not picking up the hyped technology that they're seeing, and just making sure that something fits with their strategy and opens up opportunities. So I really enjoy doing that sort of consultancy. The research that goes into it is so much fun. I love speaking. I love standing on a stage and talking to audiences. And my greatest thing is just people firing questions at me. Because if I don't know the answer, I'll go and find out. And it gives me an idea of what people want to know about as well. And I absolutely love it when I get thrown curveballs and I'm like, right, how are we going to do this one? So yes, I really, really want to do an awful lot more work with businesses, with speaking. I've got various books in the pipeline. I've got a non-fiction that's due to kick off quite soon. And obviously I've got to write book 6 in that series. So that's going to keep me occupied. And I kind of fancy actually getting towards my 4th Dan. I've got about 3 years of training to go before I would even be considered, but I just enjoy the karate.
Brilliant. Well, keep enjoying the karate, keep writing the books, keep speaking, keep doing all the brilliant things you do. And thanks ever so much for finding the time to come and talk to me today.
It's a pleasure. It's been really fun.
It has. Thanks, Kate. Thank you for listening to Fear Less, Do More. All of our guests come from a diverse range of backgrounds, but they all share a common drive to face their fears, take action, and create meaningful impact. If you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast, please follow us, Square One Law, on Instagram and LinkedIn, and share the content with your friends, family, and networks. Thank you, and see you again on our next episode.